Chapter 3.3 Nika Nickel-Eyes. Nika and Tobias were further and further from Red as the begging crowds funneled in. They pushed and shoved, vying for Nika's attention, and elbowed Retta away. They were crammed like sardines, and no brute force would get Retta closer. She looked for pockets. Red squeezed in between, slipped in the cracks, and through careful perception, closed the gap. But Tobias and Nika were still too far. They were just at the edge of the mob, their voices distant, their conversation muffled, and the sounds of the crowd drowned out the vital conversation Retta wanted answers to. As close as Red got to breaking free, the sea of beggars washed over her. It swallowed Retta in the waves of the crowd and separated her from Nika and Tobias. "Damn it, move!" Retta thought, fruitlessly fighting against the current. "Move!" She needed to hear Nika. She needed to know Tobias' secrets that Nika knew. Right, and I still need to get Nika's key. She almost lost sight of the goal. Retta focused herself. Her curiosity always got the better of her. Priorities, she thought. Keys first, secrets later. But secrets were so tempting. "Out of the way," said a deep Cockney voice, shoving past Retta and knocking her off balance. She stumbled into a beggar and bounced back to her feet. "Hey, watch it!" The wide-set peddler barreled through the crowds, shoved others aside, and left a gap in his wake. A clear corridor was left behind him. Retta realized an opportunity presented itself. Actually, keep that up. Retta followed in his wake, slithered up behind him, and latched onto his back like a leech to its host. He parted the sea of peddlers, pushed against waves of people, and barreled closer and closer to Nika. Retta was so close, she swore she heard Nika. "Traitor," Retta heard, but for some reason, Nika's voice sounded wispy, like a whisper in the wind. "A liar, and a traitor." Nika's voice was distant, airy, and drowned by a cacophony of quieter, different voices. "Please, listen, I need gold. I have gold. You love my... Out of my way, I need her. I have so much to offer. My family, they need... These crowds are annoying me. She's my ticket off this hellhole. Nika! Nika! Ruff! Ruff! Mom? Mom? Who's the outsider with the scarf? Don't push me, buddy!" Retta looked at her baton and saw its pulse. It beat like a heart, and its light ebbed and flowed, in and out as the sounds around her dissipated away. Her footsteps disappeared. The pushing and shoving went silent. The wind and the sands were listless. These whispers aren't voices. They're thoughts. It was what happened with Jimbo, except this time, the baton spread through the crowd. It connected the thoughts like a mind web, coalescing together like static. Retta had an idea. Can I control this? She tried focusing her concentration. Can I use this to read Nika's mind? Maybe then she could get Tobias' secrets. Retta concentrated, focusing on the warmth of the tattoo, the echoing voices in her head, and felt the static slowly rise, crescendo, escalate, and climb. The voices grew louder. All of them. "Listen to me, you bitch! Listen! You don't need that money. We need that money! Why are you so heartless? Why? I'm hungry, so hungry. I'm begging you. I'm pleading with you. Traitor! My children, they need this. Nika, here! Nika! 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 Nika!" The voices grew louder, 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 mind-numbingly loud, ear-searingly loud, head-poundingly loud. The voices screamed in Retta's head. They bounced off the inner walls of her skull. The pressure grew and mounted. The tension pressed and expanded. The thoughts had no release, like the sound would burst her eardrums from the inside out, crack her skull, and break out her forehead. Red squeezed her temples, struggled to concentrate, and heard her ears ring. She grit her teeth and tried to control the baton, but its power was overwhelming. "Please, stop," she begged, covered her glowing tattoo, and squeezed her wrist. "Please, stop!" Her plan backfired. The pressure was so intense she felt lightheaded, woozy, and off-kilter. She stumbled while trailing the barreling torpedo man and fell into the crowds. She fell onto a beggar, who shoved Retta off her and into another. Red bounced from beggar to beggar like a pinball, shoved throughout the crowd, struggling to regain composure. At one point, she stopped, opened her eyes, and saw a beggar's lips moving, but the world was silent. Sound was overpowered by the mind-crushing discord of the Baton's raging sea of thoughts. The crowd swallowed her whole with no escape. Red had no clue where she was, which way was forward, or where Tobias and Nika went. All Red knew now was that she needed to escape. The Baton was powerful, and in a crowd, dangerous. She couldn't control it. Retta clawed to escape, slid her hands between beggars, and wedged her way through. She was desperate, struggling with a mix of desperation and asphyxiation. Retta finally found a purchase. She slipped through the crowd, shot forward, and tumbled to the ground in a spray of dirt, dust, and sand. She was starved for air, and finally had space. Red wheezed to breathe, inhaled too deep, and surprised her lungs, sending her into a coughing fit until she was red in the face. The crowds grew silent. Retta caught her breath, and she had a feeling something wasn't right. She opened her eyes, looked up at the sky, and obscuring the blazing bright sun and the blue sky was the silhouette of Nika Nickel-Eyes. Retta landed at her feet. Nika leaned over, blotted out the sun, and whispered with an imminent threat on her lips. "You're in my way." Nika stepped over Retta and marched on with Tobias. Her keys dangled loosely in her hand and glistened as the sunlight caught its metal edges. They were within reach, and Retta lunged for them. It was a mistake. With a swift turn, Nika slapped Retta with the back of her hand. Her gold metal rings cut Retta's cheek, smacking her to the ground. The speed and force of Nika's slap felt like whiplash and made Red's ears ring. The thoughts went silent. She was back to reality. Retta recoiled back, faced Nika, and saw that Nika swapped her key in her hand with a knife. She pointed the tip squarely at Retta's neck. "You try to steal from me?" Nika's shadowed shape loomed larger over Retta. She gripped Red's curly hair in one hand and yanked Red off the ground, so hard she thought her scalp would tear from Nika's strength. Her cold metal knife pressed against Retta's neck as a bead of sweat and blood trickled down her cheek. The stunned crowd was silent, and Nika had one offer to Red. "One word. Make it count." Bad choice. From the crowd, a frazzled and hurried voice yelled, "Nika! Nika! Please, let me show you what I have! Let me—" A young, ragged man, dirtied and with torn linens, rushed towards Nika with a crate of various springs and bits in hand. Nika yanked Retta by the hair and threw her towards the man like a bowling ball. Red crashed into him. His wares flew into the air and then hit the ground, shattering to pieces. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, Nika. I didn't realize you were busy." The seller dropped to his knees and pleaded. "I was excited to see you. Oh, and I apologize to you as well, Miss—" Nika spit on the ground and it instantly sizzled into steam. "Not interested." She turned and walked away with Tobias. The seller ignored his broken wares, crawled towards Retta, and laid a hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked. Up close, she could appreciate how handsome he was. The iris of his eyes were liquid gold with the clarity of diamond, clear as day that seemed to hide the secrets of night. His beard was trimmed to a tight, rough scruff, his chiseled face and jawline in stark contrast to the perfect complexion of his skin. Had a face been created to be the ideal form, his would be it. She felt her eyes widen, her skin flush, and the slightest glow of the baton at her wrist. "I'm ever so sorry, really," he kept apologizing in a timid tone that seemed counter to his looks. "I'm so sorry, I could never have—" He kept on until he turned and noticed Nika was out of earshot. And then his tone immediately changed. His real voice was suave and deep. "All right, she's gone," he said, the act up and the secret out. "You gotta get better at stealing." The man was now calm and candid with her. Lunging at Nika is reckless. He stood and offered his hand to Retta to lift her up. He was a head taller than her, and removing his hood, she appreciated his tight, black hair, his tan skin, and his longer, messy top. His smile was wily, as if he knew a secret she was naive to. "I'm sorry, who are you?" she said, grabbing his hand and pulling herself up. His wily smile wiped away from his face. Deegan. He stopped, waiting as if she should recognize him. You know, the freedom fighter? With each moment of hesitation, she noticed his confidence drain from his face. No, I don't. He mused under his breath. Guess I'm still just a hometown hero then. Well, either way, I need something on her ship, and you seem to want her keys. Maybe you can help me get on there? Maybe, she said, lingering on the maybe and hesitating. But what do I get out of it? He whipped out a gold key, the one that Nika spun around her finger. You get her ship. Deegan showed Retta the key, and a hologram flickered around it, revealing a normal silver key underneath the fake skin. It's a duplicate. But we swap this with hers, and she'll be none the wiser. And how do I know I can trust you? Retta said, crossing her arms. Well, Deegan said, his uncanny wily smile back. I did just save you, and if you can't tell by now, then you've got bigger problems. With her arms crossed, she suddenly slid her hand over the Baton's tattoo and felt the faint glow from earlier fade away. So, he asked again, what do you say?